filter. So it sounds like I'm whispering or have a cold. That is because of the stroke on my left, which has affected my left side. For those of you in the medical field, I have an acute infarct of the right thalamus. I have a tumor on my parotid gland. I have, that's why, Sarah, that's why I drool. It's not because I'm sloppy. I have a stent in my heart because they found out that the left pulmonary artery supplying blood to my left ventricle was 99.9% blocked. I have dropful. My left side, my wife hates the word, so I don't say paralyzed because I can do things like that. My left side. My left side is challenged. Is that a better word? Better word. I told Kelly Harris heard me tell the people in Chicago that the devil took his best shot at me. He got my left side, but he fooled around and left me in my right mind. If you would turn back to your pew Bibles or your iPhones, either one, to that Matthew passage. The last verse of the chapter 13 says, Jesus did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith. The people in the synagogue where Jesus was brought up were amazed. They said among themselves, where did he get this wisdom and these miraculous powers? Please notice the disrespect is so deep and the shade they throw on Jesus is so thick that they never refer to him or call him by his given name, his God-given name. They just call him this man or the carpenter's son. Isn't this the carpenter's son? For the few moments we have to share together today, I'd like for you to pray with me on the theme, we knew him when. Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary? And aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas the same guys we see every day of the week? And aren't his sisters right here with us in Nazareth? Where did he get all this stuff from? Shade. Using this Matthew 13 pericope as the canvas against which I would like to paint today's sermonic portrait. I want to use as a title, We Knew Him When. When Jesus came to his own hometown, he was coming home. He was coming back to the place where he grew up. Now, before you wonder why my wife is turning my page, I neglected to tell you that I also have ocular neuropathy and diplopia. Those medical terms mean I am blind in one eye and can't see out the other. Jesus was coming back to the place where he grew up. He was coming back to the same streets where he played soccer with his brothers and the other young boys in the neighborhood. Jesus was coming back home to the place where he first learned about, experienced, and knew love, the love of his family, and his first experience of falling in love with a young Jewish girl when they both were in the opening phases and stages of puberty. He was coming home. Every time I come home to Philadelphia, I am reminded of the passages in Luke and Matthew which describe Jesus coming back to the place where he first heard the scriptures read, back to the place where he first learned Shema, Shema Yisrael, Adonai, Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one God. He was coming back to the place where he first heard and learned the songs of Zion, and the place where he first worshiped in the synagogue and observed Passover with those who made up his immediate family circle. It was here in my hometown, Germantown, that I first heard the hymn, "Break thou the bread of life, dear Lord, to me, as thou didst break the loaves beside the sea. Beyond the sacred page, I seek thee, Lord, my spirit pants for thee, O living word." It was on East Sharpneck Street at the Old Grace where I first saw the light. It was during a fall revival under the pastorate of my father that I came to the realization that Jesus had died for me. It was here in Philly that the Wrights Gospel Chorus used to rehearse at our parents' home, 68 West Duval Street. It was here in Mount Airy that I attended Emlyn Elementary School, along with your members, Barbara Bell and Barbara Abrams. Sister Abrams would argue that she is younger than me and younger than Barbara Bell, but we were all there at Chew Avenue and Upsall Street together. Coming home reminds me of Reverend Walter Wynn and his Liberian sisters who are not sitting together in his service. Ingrid's back there, Margaret's over here. It was here that so many familiar faces and names flood my memory every time the plane lets down its landing gear to touch down on the runway of the Philadelphia airport. It is here at home that I can get original Philly cheesesteaks and hoagie. Coming home as an adult, however, is very different and a different experience than when I used to come home from college in my late teens. My sanctified imagination tells me it was the same way for Jesus when he came home to his family in the town where he grew up. Being a boy in Nazareth and being a grown man coming back to Nazareth were two different experiences altogether. He grew up in Galilee as a boy, but he was baptized by John in the Jordan River as a man. He learned how to play soccer on the dusty roads of Nazareth as a boy. He was driven into the wilderness by the Holy Spirit to be tempted by the devil as a man. He went to synagogue school in Nazareth. He learned the Shema under the tutelage of the rabbis at the school and synagogue as a boy. He taught in the temple as a bar mitzvah young man at the age of 12, the age Jewish boys passed from boyhood into manhood. He ate with his family around the dinner table in Joseph's home as a boy. He fed 5,000 men and 15,000 women and children by the Sea of Galilee as a man. His experiences of healing the sick, his experience of speaking to a man let down through the roof, crippled by 4 friends of his in Capernaum, his experience of stopping a funeral procession outside the city of Nain, his healing the lepers, his giving Bartimaeus his sight back, his friendship as a grown man with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus in Bethany, all shaped and formed him as a rabbi, a holy man, a sacred teacher of the scriptures, and the one and only begotten Son of God as a man. Coming back home as a man was very different for Jesus. The text teaches us and what he ran into, which is what I want to look at with you today, what I ran into or used to run into when my parents were alive. this whole attitude of, we knew you when. We knew him when. There are 3 broad brushstroke lessons I want to leave with you today, so let me hurry up and get to them. The first lesson this text teaches me can best be remembered by saying, perception, prevention. Say that with me, perception, prevention. Your perception of the messenger many times prevents your reception of the message. Let me say that again. One's perception of the messenger many times prevents one's reception of the message. Look at it, it's in the text. Jesus came home and was teaching in the synagogue in Nazareth, just as he had taught in the other synagogues in Galilee. And the people there in his own home church put a note right there, put a little asterisk in. These are church folk who are having a problem with Jesus and his teachings. These aren't gangbangers. These aren't drug dealers or drug users. These aren't winos, hopheads, crack hoes, blow or blunt smokers having a problem. These are church folk. I didn't put this in the manuscript because I got stuck right here. I was trying to wonder what kind of church folk these were. I said maybe they were visitors. You know, Palestine was colonized by the Romans, so maybe these are some Italian visitors. Yeah, European visitors in a Palestinian church. I said, no, these are his own people. They knew his name, they knew his bio. These are his own folk. Kelly, maybe these were black pastors for Trump, Caesar. Who just had a meeting at the White House. Came out and said, Trump is not a racist. Ray Charles can see Trump as a racist. These are church folk. The church folk would not receive what Jesus was teaching because of their perception of him as the carpenter's son. Ain't this the carpenter's boy? Now, let your sanctified imaginations run parallel with mine for just a moment and hear their question remixed in 2019 language. Ain't this Joe's boy? Sure Lil. You talking about the wood carver. That's what they call him in Kumasi in Ghana. Mm-hmm. His father made a front door for my mama last year. Joe did the casket we buried Uncle Bubba in 2 years ago. This is the carpenter's son teaching all this Torah? Yep. You mean Mary's firstborn? Don't take me there. Don't start down that road. There's a whole lot of speculation about when they got married, if they were married, when she got pregnant. You know what I'm talking about? Sure do. I know you're not going there. I can't even. Last we seen of her in Nazareth, she was telling that story about the angel Gabriel and a midnight visit with some bizarre tale about the Holy Ghost overcoming her. You remember? She found favor with God. You remember that? Sure do. I don't mean no harm, but I'm just saying. Because their perception of Jesus was sketchy, surrounded with controversy, and limited to his being the son of a carpenter, they could not receive his message of the kingdom of God. They could not receive his preaching and teaching about the love of God. Their perception blocked their reception, And how true is that same reality today? I don't know how it is when Pastor Buck goes home. I don't know how it is when you go back home, for those of you who are not born here in Philadelphia. I do know, however, how it is for me when I come home. Before the presidential election of 2008, when I came home, I inevitably ran into the We Knew You Win folk, especially church folk, especially members of the Grace Baptist Church of Germantown, where I grew up. Somebody always wanted to remind me of bad little Buddy running up and down the aisles of Old Grace on Sharpneck Street. Everybody had a We Knew Him Win story, from Little Green Sunday School to Reverend Wynn's wife's BYPU class, to Mrs. Sylvia Carroll's Cub Scout den, to Mr. Carroll's Boy Scout troop. Everybody had a buddy story, from Vacation Bible School in my primary grades up through being in my father's class in VBS and learning the art of woodcraft and photography with my old Brownie Hawkeye camera, developing film and enlarging pictures. Everybody had a I Knew Him When story. From the Christmas play, when Joe Jackson, Warren McBee, and I were the three wise men, coming down the aisle with gold and glitter painted cardboard crowns on our heads, senior choir robes on our backs, wooden clothesline poles for our staff, trying to sing and keep from laughing all at the same time. We three kings of Orient are bearing gifts, we traverse afar. Warren said, "What's traverse?" From the Christmas play to the Easter pageant, everybody, say that, everybody had a We Knew You When story. Cody Anderson, who sends his congratulations, Pastor Buck, his wife is not feeling well, so he did not think he would get here today. But Cody Anderson blessed my life about 3 decades ago now. Cody grew up in Chicago, right down the street from Trinity United Church of Christ, but he had left for Central State by the time I got to the pastor at the Trinity. He heard his sister Carol mention me from time to time, but he had no exposure to me until I preached his father's funeral. While he ministered to his dad in his father's dying days, Cody witnessed his father walking around the house with earphones on, listening to some tapes. Anybody here remember the old cassette tapes? Jada, that was back in BC time. BC does not mean before Christ, it means before computers. Before computers, before CDs, before iPads, iPhones, and iPods, there was something called cassette tapes. And Mr. Anderson had a pile of cassette tapes he was listening to as he was dying. Cody saw his father laughing, smiling, weeping, and enjoying the tapes, and Cody thought it must have been some jazz artists that his dad was listening to because his father loved jazz music. When he asked which musician he was being moved so deeply by, Mr. Anderson said, "There's a young preacher right there across the tracks named Jeremiah Wright. You ought to hear him." When Cody heard my tapes after having heard me preach at his father's funeral, he said publicly at the Canaan Baptist Church during a revival when Gus Roman was pastor, while introducing me, Cody said he wanted to give back to the man who had given his father joy and hope during the last days of his father's life. And Cody started putting me on his radio program every morning, Monday through Friday. During that season of my life, people I had never met in my life picked up different stories from my sermons. And whenever I would come home to Philly, whenever they would meet me, they would quote one of the stories they heard on WHAT and WURD. They knew me when from my sermons. Then came the 2008 presidential election. The campaign managers and the media's vicious attacks on me, attacks on my life, my ministry, my family, and my legacy. Fox News, ABC, CBS, and MSNBC sent provocateurs to the church who went straight to the tape ministry and spent $2,000 each buying 20 years worth of sermons to see what the Obamas have been listening to for 20 years. Barack and Michelle Obama have been members of the church for 20 years, and Megan, the white folks wanted to see what these Negroes have been listening to under this radical American preacher, anti-American preacher. Please remember, this anti-American preacher had served 6 years in the military, 2 years in the Marine Corps, 4 years in the Navy. Neither O'Reilly nor Hannity and the haters had spent any time, not one day, in the military, yet they call me anti-American. Their search through and combing through 20 years of sermons produced 2 sound bites that they use over and over again, trying to scare white voters and colored folks who do not want to be identified with anybody militant, anybody radical and unacceptable to their white neighbors and co-workers. They picked the sermon I preached on the Sunday following 9/11/01, and they picked the sermon I preached before Obama was in the Senate. The title of those 2 sermons, in case you want to hear the whole sermon, the titles are The Day of Jerusalem's Fall and Confusing God and Government. They did not play the entire sermon for shocked white voters to hear. They only played enough of a soundbite from each sermon to scare folk, and from that point on, I became known as the Muslim minister, masquerading as a Christian. I became known as Obama's pastor. My life was defined by the media in terms of those 2 sound bites from 2 different sermons, and the nation began to label me and to misidentify me because they thought they knew me when. 11 years later, in case you had not noticed, ain't nothing changed on the media front. Michelle Obama, in her best-selling book, Becoming, Michelle says, when she found out that I went on rants and blamed all white people for our conditions as blacks, she knew it was time for them to leave our church. This is 11 years after the 2008 campaign. Now, first of all, that's a lie. I have never said that in life. I taught our members for 36 years, everybody your color ain't your kind. Somebody say Clarence Thomas. Somebody say Ben Carson. Everybody your color ain't your kind. And everybody not your color is not your enemy. That's what I said for 36 years, but you got to be in church to hear that. And Michelle came to church about as often as the senator. Y'all kept asking, was he here? Oops, don't say that, don't say that. As a sidebar or footnote, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson cleaned Michelle's clock on